The future you deserve is the future that you serve.
Look at government. So look at government as the Saturnian figure, and look at the citizens of said countries as a rebelling Sagittarius. I don't even have to reiterate and give you examples of that. That's all over the news. Go look anywhere. Just go watch RT or go look at some alternative news sources online. You can even look at Fox. Well, I don't know. They don't really have real dialogue with actual citizens, the broadcast news. Because they can't. Because at this point, they would have no credibility, and every single person that is a legitimate person that's not staged would be revolting against the media, and then they'd lose all their fan base. So go actually look at authentic people, or ask people you know on the street, somewhere, whatever, what they really think of their government right now, or their country, or people running their country. And you'll see what I'm talking about. Then we look in the educational standard. So Saturn being the teacher, or the structure, the course. So it would be like the core structure of higher education. So as people traditionally know, there's certain classes you have to take or whatever that are part of your AA, part of your core classes, things you don't want to take that aren't part of your major per se, depending on what you're studying, that you have to go through. That's a Saturnian thing. It's covering your bases. It's building your foundation. Well, okay, so with it being in Sagittarius, there's this mentality like, well, we want to expand this. We want to improve this. Issue is that if you needed to go to school, like legitimately go to school in the first place, there's obviously something you don't know. So why the hell are you picking the structure? That's the whole point of there being wisdom and authoritarian and some sort of person who has been through what you're going through and has then not decided but guided this certain outline and then given you choices. You can do this or you cannot. You can go to school or you cannot. Like I said, a lot of the things that I am very thorough in, I'm self-taught. So I could have either done that or I could not, and I didn't. So I did it myself. That's the right way to channel that Sagittarius energy. Don't try to revolt and overthrow the actual foundation and tradition. Just go figure it the fuck out somewhere else and create some other educational institution. Don't change the universities. I was like, but I also think that a lot of that comes into play because when Saturn was in Scorpio, that was secrets and manipulating the systems and the structures in the government. So I think that played into the educational institutions as well. Then we look into religion. And this is the one that's obviously that I've been focused on a lot. So in a religious point, Saturn in old associations ruled Aquarius as well as Capricorn. Aquarius is actually known for being the Antichrist or death or Satan. And that's why it always brings a lot of pain and trauma and whatever. So back in ancient astrology, there was the Saturnian church, which was the Latin church. So that actually plays into the really totalitarian, hardcore, barbaric concepts and customs of ancient, well, I wouldn't say ancient forms, but I mean, you know, the initial forms of Christianity that were similar to Islam. Okay, so now we're seeing the Sagittarius sign, which is that one that's, you know, so fixated on knowing what's best and being, you know, the god of gods and or Zeus in certain things, that is now trying to test the religious traditions. So that's why there's this huge revolt against Christianity, and also why they're trying to now use Old Testament stuff that's been rectified as the authority, more or less, to revolt against said religious authority or tradition. So they're trying to expand on tradition and in the process changing it. And the fact that Uranus is in Aries and Sagittarius, Saturn's in Sagittarius, those are both fire signs, they're going to have trines very frequently. So actually, this is a great example of this because there is a trine right now with Uranus and Saturn. So trines are good, right? Well, if you take that unpredictable ambush, chaotic, rebellious soldier type and then join them or make a team with them with that Sagittarius, thinks that they know what's best for everyone, trying to revolt and take down the traditions, the authority, and the system, or the religious institution. Is that really going to be good? Well, I guess it depends on the personal planets involved. So this is where I lead into this. So once you establish what Uranus and Aries represents, and Saturn and Sagittarius represents, then we see, is there any aspects to personal planets? And what do those personal planets mean? So now we look, if we're going to use Uranus and Saturn as an example here, we look at, let's just go ahead and start back with Uranus. What aspects Uranus from personal planets? We have a sextile to the Sun, as I mentioned before. We have an opposition with Lilith, which is what I've talked about frequently. We have a quincunx to Mars. And then we have a semi-square to the Moon. And then we have a square to Mercury, Pluto, obviously, we've already known about that, and Venus. Okay. So, what would that kind of a rebellious soldier that wouldn't follow, established warfare rules, and somebody who actually is being encouraged by somebody saying you're doing the right thing to overthrow the tradition, what would that constitute when we look at the personal planets involved? So the sextile with the Sun would mean the Sun usually represents the self, or individual, or it represents an actual country, like an individual country. So that would mean that sextile to the Sun is that rebellious soldier and that person who is delusional and thinks that they're doing what's good for everyone, they're actually making progress. So what would that mean? Then you can compare, actual events going on, or use an ephemeris to see what historical events and synchronistic themes happened the last time similar aspects were going on with the generational planets. That would mean that those rebels, and that essentially the same concept of somebody being sick in the head like Hitler per se, they actually are getting away or making progress with annihilating or overthrowing authority, regardless if it's religious, government, or any kind of major sociological institution. That would be like corporations, lobbyists, etc., whatever, politics. So, and then you see that there's a sextile is also with Saturn to the Sun, meaning that just reinforces this. So even though those are all supposed to be good, the trine from Uranus to Saturn, and then the sextile from Saturn to the Sun, and then another sextile from the Sun to Uranus, do you understand how the generational planets that are setting the tone have now changed how that sextile and that trine actually functions? Yes, Saturn and Uranus are getting their way. Great, that's good. If you were essentially some sort of microcosmic, symbol or actual living replica or symbol of Saturn or Uranus, Saturn or Uranus in this case. But if you were the Sun, technically, even though that's supposed to be good, that's not really good. They're killing it. And the fact that the Sun's in Aquarius right now explains that there's going to be a lot more trauma going on. Like, the destabilization and the dissolve has been happening since that original Neptune and Saturn square. Because think of that too. Neptune doesn't like boundaries. Saturn is boundaries. If you understand how the great did, water obviously didn't like the boundaries. And it took a while, but look, it got its way. And it eroded all of the earth and the rock. Same concept. Over time, Neptune will eventually win over Saturn. Because Neptune is a continuous flowing force. So that has been going on. Essentially, I would assume this is really started to the plan really started to go into effect when Saturn was in Scorpio. But there's always, different cause and effects that can be predispositions and play into something later down the line. And so basically what I'm getting at is that right now with the sun being in Aquarius, there's either going to be a lot of trauma or there's going to be like hemorrhaging of actual countries or people in them being the symptom of the hemorrhaging. So the structure and the overall stability of countries will be likely getting substantially worse, escalating very quickly right now within this next 2 or 3 weeks. And it'll just continue to escalate from here on out. And let's see, what else is trading? Okay, so Pluto has to do obviously with death, transformation, and it also contributes to disease, right? Well, it's sextiling Chiron. Chiron's your weakness, right? Weakness would be, for example, let me see. I have Chiron in my first house. I am a Gemini rising. I also have asthma. So I have problems breathing because Gemini rules the lungs, right? So if I had, unfortunately I don't, but if I actually had some sort of, sextile with Pluto and Chiron was actually where it is in my chart, and say there was some sort of transit thing that went over it, like maybe Uranus went over my Chiron or something, or Pluto actually went over my Chiron, or Saturn even, I could actually develop pneumonia or some sort of like respiratory infection that would fucking kill me because of that sextile with Pluto. Transition, death, disease, and that sort of thing. Being with your weakness. So that's not okay. That's not good. Okay? So Pluto obviously being in Capricorn too, we think back to structure. So the laws, structure of a country or nation. Either from looking at laws on the books and or actual physical borders. So we have that sextile Pluto right now. And then you notice that there is, where is it? There's a trine between Pluto and Jupiter. So Jupiter in Virgo is the detriment, obviously. So as Jupiter usually wants to expand and look at the bigger picture, or expand the picture per se, Virgo would never even dream of that because they're too busy looking at the little details that Jupiter never could have even noticed. So it's basically the same kind of conflict that goes on with Saturn and Sagittarius with Virgo and Jupiter. So that trine with Pluto right there, there's going to be a purging or a discarding of any kind of optimism to maybe address some of the issues going on or the weaknesses going on, i.e. the hemorrhaging. You see what I'm saying? So, and obviously Jupiter being opposition with Chiron too means that everybody's going to be in denial about the actual problem or the weakness or the source of the turmoil now going on. Weird. That was a trine contributing to that. Weird. And then also, if you want to look at this from a health perspective here, if actually, that's really funny because the trine between Saturn and Uranus right now, Saturn being in the house of health, so, and then Uranus being in the 11th, that would have to do with people randomly getting sick today or yesterday, the last couple of days. I'm not even going to get into that because the reason why my voice kind of sounds like this is because I've been sick this morning. So But yeah, so I'm not gonna go any further than this, and I'm gonna cut this a bunch down so it's choppy, whatever. But those are just the examples that I wanted to reiterate. So when you're dissecting something, you need to understand the actual parameters of said board game, which would be the outer planets. What are your limitations? What is the initial rules, etc., etc. And then the personal planets, depending on if you're looking from a mundane, political, or an astro-psychological, or just an astrological perspective, and I guess natally, then you would understand the parameters or the what somebody would have to work with, what each personal planet would have to work with. What are the things that they're kind of backed into a corner with? Where do they have, different options to pick and choose? Those are all determined by the initial rules and the initial game set. So I just proved right there that all those sextiles and trines right there are actually direct translations of the world going to hell right now. So please, go ahead and explain to me again how sextiles and trines are always beneficial. Maybe to you. Maybe you want the world to burn to the ground. But that's not me. I don't want to.